Good morning. If you want to turn to the 39th Psalm or page whatever in your book, if it may take you a while to find page whatever, but 52, does that sound right, or did I not change my number? Behind technically, because we did the lesson for the 5th last week, and we're doing the lesson for the 12th today. And I decided which one that we're going to skip to catch back up, but I forgot which one it was, so I can't tell you, so sorry about that. While you're turning there, if I didn't waste enough time already, I'll extend a little invitation to our Wednesday night Bible study. If you're able to join us, we've been studying the letters of Paul, more or less branching off from our 2022 Life of Christ study. It's more like a whole experience almost. The entire year we went into Acts from that, and then on Wednesday night we sort of picked up in Romans from when we were done with Acts. But we're taking a short break. We just finished 2 Thessalonians, and by request we will be starting a study of Revelation on Wednesday nights for an indefinite period of time. Hopefully not too terribly long, but long enough to do justice to what is arguably the single most avoided book of the New Testament for many people. For a large number of other people, it's maybe the single most thought about book, but maybe for the wrong reasons. So it'll be a very interesting and fruitful study. Book of Revelation, much needed. It's been a few years since we even took a look at the book of Revelation. So I just want to, if possible, if you're able to join us on Wednesday night, starting, Lord willing, 3 days from today, we'll be in the book of Revelation. But here we are in the Psalms, in this first part of the study of the Psalms, in the 39th Psalm, which is entitled, Hear My Prayer, which is kind of a lot of Psalms, but in particular maybe this one. Whenever people start to experience unexpected difficulties, they may start to question whether or not God, I guess they may start questioning God at period, whether or not He's even there for some people, or whether or not He cares. Even God's people may start to question or wonder in a moment of weakness. Whenever people, as a rule, it seems, are not great at enduring difficulties that suddenly come up unexpected, which are many of the difficulties that we face. Probably the majority of difficulties we face are ones that we didn't see coming, or that we know that difficulties will come, but specific ones that come, if we're not prepared or expecting them, we don't handle it too well. We may not handle it very well for a very short time. We may not handle it very well for a very long time. But as a rule, we may, in immediate reaction is usually maybe not the ideal reaction. And that can lead us maybe to question that whether God is paying attention, or whether He cares, or whether He's listening. But either way, prayer sometimes is the natural next step. We might pray to God, but maybe not in a patient way. We may want immediate action or something that we don't get, and we may feel the right to tell God what it is that we want and what we think He should do, and when we think He should do it, rather than trusting that He knows what's best, and His timing is always best, and His wisdom is always greater than our own. But we pray in times of despair, and maybe those prayers seem like they're totally pointless. We're powerless. What's the point of praying? We're not going to get relief. at least what we think of as relief. And especially if the person is not living in a way that is pleasing to God or honors God, that relief may seem very far away. And there may be a reason for that if we look more inward. Maybe that's the kind of thing that David was feeling when he wrote this psalm, the 39th Psalm. But instead of accusing God of deserting him, instead of accusing God of some wrongdoing, he believed that God was involved in some of the things that he was suffering. It's kind of fitting that we just finished talking about Job on Sunday afternoon, because Job was in a similar situation. He was suffering. He didn't understand why. He didn't know why God was letting it happen, or from his perspective, why God was making it happen. And he just wanted answers. Why is this happening? David is in a similar situation. He was greatly distressed. He was greatly suffering. And the thing that he needed most was God's mercy. However, was God listening? That's kind of the question. I need God's mercy. Is God listening? Just like with Job. Is God even listening? I would like to be able to go up and stand before him and tell him what's going on and explain my case to him. But is he listening? For us, instead of wondering whether God is hearing our prayers, Christians can have the confidence that he is listening. He is there. He does listen. 1 John 5:14, the Apostle John said, "This is the confidence that we have toward him," that is God, "that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us." Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. The thing is, Jesus, he prayed the way he prayed, I guess his own personal prayer life, because he understood the connection, the closeness and the blessing that prayer is. So he wanted to talk to his Heavenly Father. Yeah, Dean?
I think sometimes we don't realize that prayer is actually, we are actually talking to God.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we'd be talking to somebody else here in class. We are, when we pray, we are actually communicating and talking to God.
Yeah.
And that's just sometimes I think we lose that.
Yeah. Yep. We should think of it like that more often. That, it's just like talking to people. At least the concept. Why do you talk to that person so much? Why have you been talking to them so much? Because I want to talk to them. I talk to them a lot because I want to talk to them. Why do you talk to God so much? Because I want to talk to God. David, we talked about how so many of these psalms are a psalm is a hymn. It's a musical thing. So many of these psalms are prayers in one way or another. But Christians, I already said sometimes Christians can even struggle with this, but as God has told us, he does hear. He does listen when his people pray. If we ask anything according to his will, he hears us, period. Does not mean that God's going to necessarily remove every single trial that we face, or even less so, prevent us from ever suffering any trials. Some of those trials have benefits, for one thing, that we won't be able to gain without the trial. But regardless of anything else, God cares. The fact that He sent Jesus to die in our place is enough proof about the situation that we're in as a human race, but it also goes down to the very individual. He cares about the things that I face. And He listens. And He cares. Maybe most importantly is the fact that He'll forgive us when we repent. Ask for forgiveness. Again, John said, 1 John 1:9, as we walk in the light, if we walk in the light as He's in the light, He will forgive us of our sins, trespasses, and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. But we have to understand that in trials, His timing, His judgment, His wisdom is foremost. And we have to trust. That takes submission and trust. So David's going to show in this psalm to trust in God and His timing and His wisdom and His judgment takes patience, it takes self-control, it takes self-awareness, and that's what he's going to be talking about here. All right, here's how he starts. Psalm 39, beginning in verse 1, he says, I said, I will guard my ways, that I may not sin with my tongue. I will guard my mouth with a muzzle, so long as the wicked are in my presence. I was mute and silent. I held my peace to no avail, and my distress grew worse. My heart became hot within me. As I mused, the fire burned. Then I spoke with my tongue. Weird place to end, but that's where this section of the text ends. I'm going to guard my ways. David says, here's what I was saying to myself. I'm going to guard my ways so that I won't sin with my tongue. It sort of just jumps right in, assuming that it's not meant to, shoot straight from chapter 30 or Psalm 38. But he's talking about being in the presence of wicked people. And he says, I'm going to guard my ways. And he has specifically in mind his speaking, what he's going to say or not say. Doesn't want to say something that may be the wrong thing to say, a sinful thing to say, or if he's really in a bad state of mind, that where he's in weakness, he's afraid, it seems, that of what he might say that may cast a bad light on God in the eyes of those who don't know God, the true God. So I'm going to guard my ways, and I'm going to guard my tongue, I'm going to guard my mouth, so that I won't sin with my tongue. James had a lot to say about the tongue. Maybe not a lot, but he did emphasize it quite a bit compared to maybe most others, and how difficult it is to do that, to guard your mouth, or to put it how James put it, to tame your tongue. He said nobody can do it. It's impossible. You can tame the wildest animals, beasts out there, but no man can tame his own tongue. And we all underestimate the damage that it can do. David seems to be aware of the damage it can do, and that's why he's saying, I'm going to keep silent. And at this time, I'm just going to keep silent. That's not always easy, is it? To keep silent. There are some circumstances in life where something needs to be said and it's hard to speak. There are other times in life, and I would say probably more often, where you need to keep your mouth shut. And that's really hard. And able to keep your mouth shut, the thing that might come out, you have to be even more careful, because the thing that will come out may do great harm. Even Jesus understood that there were some things that he would have muscles, but he knew that he couldn't at that time. And the reason he said he couldn't is because they wouldn't be able to bear it. So we'll just put that aside. There are many things I'd like to tell you, but I can't. You can't bear them yet. So we'll just put that on hold. Sometimes silence is the best answer. Again, Job comes to mind. But that's not really what David's talking about with Job's friends and how they did their best friendly work when they just didn't say anything. But David seems to be worried about what he might say, the things he might say, and among wicked people, and end up sinning by what he's saying. So he's going to guard his mouth. He's going to take extra care not to sin with his tongue or with his words. But he also says that as he held his peace, his distress kept growing and growing and growing. It kept getting worse. Worse and worse. To the point where he couldn't hold it any longer. My heart became hot within me. The fire was burning, so then I spoke. I had to speak. And he's speaking to God. He finally has to let it out and give it to God. It's very similar to the concept that Jeremiah described about preaching. And he said, I gave up preaching because it was so heavy on me. He indicates there were times when he stopped. But he said, the longer I kept silent, something started burning. Kept burning and burning and burning to the point where I couldn't hold it in any longer. That's almost exactly identical to what David is saying here in a more personal sense of suffering. His suffering was something different than what Jeremiah was dealing with from God's own people. But then he goes on, so that was what helped me keep silent. The next 3 verses, he says this. This is what he finally spoke. O Jehovah, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am. Behold, you have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is as nothing before you. Surely all mankind stands as a mere breath. Surely a man goes about as a... Surely for nothing they are in turmoil. Man heaps up wealth and does not know who will gather. You think this, at least the first 2 verses, or these verses 4 and 5, are things that other people have picked up, just like David? Maybe wanted to know, wanted answers to, maybe wanted more explanation, or maybe wanted to know more than man is able to know. It's a pretty big thing to ask or to consider philosophically. Make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days? You could probably take a survey of many, many people. If you could know anything, any piece of knowledge that you could anything you want to know, what is the number one thing you'd like to know? I think a lot of people, they may regret it, but a lot of people, the thing they would probably pick is, I want to know the day I'm going to die. You think so? Again, you might regret it instantly if you, okay, here you go, you're going to die tomorrow. But we don't know how long our life will be. We don't know. We may not even be able to fully comprehend why the human lifespan is what it is. And we may find it objectionable. David's, at the point where these thoughts are kind of entering his mind, and he's letting it out. God, make me know more about my own life, about my own self, even maybe. Fleeting I am. You've made my days a few handbreadths. My lifetime is as nothing before you. Mankind stands as a mere breath. That sound familiar? Kind of sounds like James 4:14. What is your life? For you are a mist or a vapor, or to use David's word, a breath. You're just a breath. It's cold enough outside today. You can go outside and give a good breath. You'll see it. Or you'll see something. We call it seeing your breath. How long does it last? Not very. Just a second. Comes out. Then there it goes. Gone. David says that's how man is, mankind. Our lives, just a breath. James says a vapor, a mist. Just appears for a little time, then it vanishes. Maybe David is concerned about his own choices and the way he's using the short time he has on earth. If you were able to find out the day you're going to die, do you think it would affect your life at all? Every single person. No matter what your life view is, whether you're a Christian, whether you believe in God or whatever, once you find out the day that you're going to die, it will be impossible for it to not change your life. You're going to start doing something differently. You're going to start doing something. Because what's the maximum that answer can be, even for a 20-year-old person? You're going to die on, whatever date. So what's that? 50 years from now, maybe? Even then, it's going to affect your life. David maybe is considering, what am I doing? I'm not using time the way I ought to. And that's certainly something that we ought to consider. The New Testament tries to put that into our minds. Paul did. Make the best of the time, he told the Ephesians. He goes on. He says, surely a man goes about as a shadow, surely for nothing they're in turmoil, suffer for nothing. Or as the footnote here says, as a breath again, says as a breath, they are in turmoil. ESV says for nothing they're in turmoil. Man heaps up wealth and doesn't know who will gather. That sound familiar? Pretty sure someone dealt with that in Ecclesiastes. What's the point of gaining wealth? Your no good sons are just going to get it when you're dead. Can't take it with you. Who knows what they're going to do with it? Of course, that was his perspective, I guess, because sadly, some of his sons at least didn't turn out too great. But David's kind of saying that here. But Solomon went even farther than that. He said, I look for life's meaning in all kinds of places. In wisdom, in pleasure, in wealth, in popularity, and ambition, and on and on and on, and vanity. It's a vain pursuit. Life's meaning can be found only in a relationship with God. So that's kind of the big ending of the book of Ecclesiastes. Fear God, keep His commandments. This is the whole being of man. This is the meaning of life. Fear God and keep His commandments. Simple as that. Because everything else is vain. And especially when we consider the brevity of life, even if we were able to accrue mass amounts of wealth and fame and whatever else, still just as fleeting and as a breath as anything else is. So, What is man's days? And what are we doing with them? He goes, now, O Lord, for what do I wait? My hope is in you. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Do not make me the scorn of the fool. I am mute. I do not open my mouth, for it is you who have done it. Move your stroke from me. I am spent by the hostility of your hand. When you discipline a man with rebukes for sin, you consume him like a moth. You consume like a moth what is dear to him. All mankind is a mere breath. Hear my prayer, O Jehovah, and give ear to my cry. Hold not your peace at my tears, for I am a sojourner with you, a guest, like all my fathers. Look away from me, that I may smile again, before I depart and am no more. Sounds awfully strange and un-David-like. But we have to understand the context, what he's talking about. When he says, look away from me so that I can smile again, ouch. Like, leave me alone so that I can finally be happy again? But he's talking about this heaviness that's on him. Whatever he's going through, whatever this situation, whatever this pain is, he is at least interpreting it as discipline from God for sin. And he's saying, much like Job was, I can't take it anymore. I'm crying out to you to lift this weight. Remember we talked, I guess it was last week, about Psalm 32. And how David said, whenever I kept my sin within me, it was eating me alive inside. But as soon as I let it go, you lifted it up. You picked up the weight of the world off of my shoulders, off my chest. It's kind of like this psalm is in a similar place. It's killing me inside, so I'm now turning it over to you to lift it up. Help me out of this. Help me to, before I, you're too strong for me. Listen to my cry before you put an end to me, before it kills me for good. Don't hold your peace. Don't ignore me. Listening. Here I am. Hear me. Couldn't help but think of Peter in Luke chapter 5, verse 8, on the boat whenever he says, he sees the miracle that Jesus did, and he falls down and says, "Depart from me, because I'm a sinful man." And here David says, "Look away from me. Please, look away. Turn away." Almost like depart from me before I depart from the earth, from existing, from this discipline that you have put upon me. But David's point is not to make God seem like a sinister being or to make God seem like he's uncaring. It's quite the opposite, David knew. But notice how he turns to God and says, almost like, sure, I can't understand everything. I don't understand all the things of the world or of existence that I might like. I understand all things about you that I would like to. But he said, what am I waiting for? My hope is in you. You're the only one I can turn to. You're the hope, only hope that I have. You are the only one that can deliver me. And he's talking about his transgressions. He seems to understand that his own transgressions are the explanation for what's brought this upon him. So he's asking now God to deliver him from those transgressions and lift that discipline from him. So really, the psalm would be trying to get the reader to follow his example. He's the only one that you can turn to for relief, especially when we're talking about sin. Pointing people to God, especially when he mentions the brevity of life. Paul said, 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18, he said, so we don't lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. So, outer self might be wasting away, and in a sense it is, literally. In another sense, it may not be as bad as we think sometimes in a moment of pain. But Paul says no matter what it is, it's just momentary and it's light compared to the glory that awaits as we seek and follow God. Yes, sir. Yeah.
That had planned to see, 2026.
It's natural to make plans. It's necessary to have things lined up, to be able to actually accomplish them. But in the end, we don't know. We don't know if we'll ever see those plans come to fruition, because life is not only short in the sense of, even if you live to the oldest possible age, of the human lifespan, in the big picture, even that is just like a blink of the eye or a vapor. Yeah.
More now than ever to be present in the actual moment that you have right now.
Yeah, for many people, and it may well prove to be the downfall of human society, the most terrifying thing to think of, to consider, is being alone with your thoughts. I don't know why, but that's the only thing I can come up with because of this constant need for distraction. Because if I don't have this distraction, I may start thinking. And I would not want to do that. I don't want to think. Please don't make me think. Not great for the progress of humanity. But turning to God for deliverance and for relief. Life is short. So like David said, what am I waiting for? For what do I wait? It's easy to speak when we should be listening, especially when we think we're being mistreated. On one hand, it seems like listening is a lot easier than speaking. But it's really not. Listening is way harder. And there's a big difference between listening and just shutting up, because those aren't the same thing. You may not be speaking, but that doesn't mean you're listening. Listening is harder than we may think. That's why we also sometimes make a distinction between hearing and listening. Bible doesn't really make that distinction. It's the same thing. But you may be hearing what I'm saying, but are you really listening? Are you thinking? There's the thinking part again. Especially when we feel like we've been wronged, it's not just easy to speak, it's difficult not to speak. But David tried his best, at least at first, for a while, he refused to do that. He was not going to speak out. He was certainly not going to lash out. He didn't want to do... He knew that if God was doing this to him, which he seems to think he was, he deserved it. Sin has consequences, doesn't it? Galatians 6:7. What's that? I think it seems that there was already something that he was dealing with before the psalm even began. So he was suffering in some way. There was a heavy weight on him, and he took that to be God's hand, so to speak, because of his own actions. At least that's what it seems when he says, now what am I waiting for? Deliver me from my transgressions, so this discipline will cease. He does say that as I was silent, it kept getting worse and worse. So that did play in there in some way. Whatever a person sows, he's going to reap. You reap what you sow. That's a biblical principle. It's true in physical life. It's true in spiritual life. And it's certainly true of sin. Our only hope is to turn to God and seek forgiveness by trusting in what He has said to do to be forgiven. Number 2, David did introduce the concept of liberty to diminish the severity of our trials and trying to say, this is not so bad, it's going to be over soon. But he was saying, you need to turn to God while you can. Life is short. So while you're still here, while there's time, you need to seek God. 2 Peter 3:11, since all these things are thus to be dissolved, that is, the whole universe will be destroyed when Jesus returns, what sort of people ought you to be in lives of holiness and godliness? Great question. It is a question, technically a rhetorical question. Since this is the way it's going to be, since life is short, since all this is going to be destroyed one day, no longer exist, what sort of people ought you to be? You ought to be those who have lives of holiness and godliness. Rather than complaining about God, especially of our own making, we should seek Him. That's what we just said. Many people have still not learned this lesson, to place hope in God. It's always God's fault. What kind of God would let that happen? What kind of God would make me suffer or allow me to suffer? And so on and so forth. We don't put our trust in God. Too many times people put their trust in their money or their status or their intelligence or their own strength or whatever it might be. But those things, talk about a vapor, those things are just a vapor. A vapor of a vapor. Only God is all-powerful and all-present and all-knowing. So David was wise to turn to Him, because who else would he turn to? And that's what he said. What am I waiting for? You. And that's the lesson for us also. So when we suffer, turn to God. That doesn't just turn towards God in prayer necessarily, but what has God's will revealed? What has God said? maybe I'm suffering because I'm not in line with what God's revealed will instructs. Not in the sense of God is doing you actively because you're not, but maybe I'm creating my own bed of mess by the way I'm living. So we turn to God not only in a direct, literal sense of praying to God, but we turn to God in the sense of I'm going to trust His will for my life as well. Not just His will in the sense of my suffering, but His will in the sense of what does my life look like and what will it continue to look like as I go on. Yep, absolutely. The peace that passes understanding, that is available only as we pattern our lives after His will. And there are earthly consequences when we don't. So much pain and suffering can be avoided because it's caused by our own sin and self-will rather than humbly submitting to the will of God.